good morning, good afternoon, and to some of you even, good evening. We have a lot of people from right around the world. I just noticed Yvonne Whiteley is there from Red Scientific. Yvonne, it's wonderful to have you join us. Yvonne runs a fascinating business in using mathematics, science, physics, and the ethereal arts to design systems and strategies for very complicated things, including throwing very heavy, enormous things out of aeroplanes. Fascinating business. James, nice to see you as well. Mr. Davies, good to see you. Very good to have you join us. Graham, really good to see you again. Nice to have you. David, what frames are you wearing? I hope they're green frames. There ought to be green frames.
And they're we actually.
They're going to be really fucking busy, the taxis.
Ho Tang has managed to join us. Mr. Jensen, I read your story. Switch your camera on. You have got such a welcoming LinkedIn profile. I read your story. I read your story about how you began your business around moving people and making sure that people who struggled to move themselves were able to move themselves. And I read the wonderful story around what you saw in the Constitution of South Africa around people with disabilities. It was such a lovely, lovely entree into a business venture that seems to have grown really successfully. Wonderful to have you. Cecil Kagan, fantastic to have you. I can see, I recognize that boardroom. It's very familiar to me. Been there a couple of times. It would be wonderful if everyone could please put your cameras on. We want to make this a warm event. You know, we had the option, of course, of obviously doing a webinar, and webinars are just so dull. Doesn't matter how you skin it and how you look at it. It is such a frustrating process, talking into a screen, engaging into a screen. It's so nice to see faces. It's so nice to do home invasion in certain cases. Nico, Warren, nice to see you. Nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. Wayne Diamond, oh my word, that is a face that I have not seen for a long time. Great to have you, Wayne. Great to have you join us. Tammy, nice to have you join us. Martin, I wore a shirt like that 2 minutes ago, but I thought I'd better dress up and look a bit more formal. Because, you know, we really are the workers of the world as mid-tier business owners. Am I right, Khalid? We are the workers of the world, my friend. We are the workers of the world. Very few people born with silver spoons in their mouths go into starting a business, the grind, with the fortitude and the courage and the effort that it takes just to get through the first 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. And then the big act of exiting. Right, we have everyone joining us. It's a very warm welcome. I'm very pleased to have an opportunity to talk to you. We have got some fascinating businesses which I'd like to share with you prior to starting. I will have you out in time, on time, in order for you to carry on with your next meeting, because all of us know exactly what that process is like. We live it, and we move from one Zoom session to the next. So to give you a sense, we have got businesses in the printing industry, leading printing in packaging and labeling, which is a fantastic growth area. We have got Vodacom stores, mobile telephony and contract stores. The two of you, Andrew and Blaze, you should meet and talk. We have a lot of activity coming out of the construction, civils, engineering spaces. Bruce, Conrad, Francois, Nico, definitely the four of you should get together. You should talk. There's business to be done between yourselves. Nico's business specifically focuses in pile foundations, massive specialization in machine tooling and the steel sector. Between Chris, Graham, Jose, Ranzel, Warren, Drickus, there's everything to do, from profile cut plate steel to specific engineered machine tooling. Jose, I'm sure that you would be able to use those services, including laser robotic welding coming from Ranzel, as you look at fuel storage right across sub-Saharan and into Central Africa. We have got some very, very smart multi-channel communication software for every industry through Louise. Nice to have you join us. Simon, you no doubt know about that as you design strategy sessions and communication campaigns for your clients. In the online food space, Chris taking on Uber Eats with a far more effective and smarter platform, centered and focused purely on food and food distribution. Ashley Mulligan from Medical Express, a logistics business that focuses exclusively on things that go into the theater. Not the theater as in a performance, although it might be for some, but the theater of operation, our personal plumbing environment that keeps us functioning and living longer, possibly. We then have a number of really smart businesses. Yvonne Whiteley, I mentioned, from Red Scientific, Khalid, Jeff, Graham, all of you. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. If you can measure it and you can see it, well, then it provides an even better outcome. All four of you in that space. We have some businesses here involved in metal assay, baby vegetable distribution and sourcing, baby vegetables right across Europe, right across the UK. What an interesting positioning, Carly. I really enjoyed reading it. We've got some very, very smart technology in super smart chatbots. We have a business here from Philip that specializes exclusively in poultry lighting. It is not just simply switching a globe on and off. The lights, how they work, the types of lights, the intensity of the lights, all involved in keeping poultry happy and healthy. Kiers, you have a chocolate factory. When I was a kid, that's all I wanted to have. It's all I wanted to be. I still intend to come through and taste and sample your chocolates and many, many others. So it's a very, very warm welcome. Again, if you're able to, please put on your cameras so we can see you, we can have a human engagement, and I'm going to proceed immediately from there. Our strategic alliance as Andersen and Aurik is your strategic advantage. We are going to show you how we combine expertise in business growth and exit to work with you to build your business into a wealth generating asset. As mentioned, I'll have you out at 5 to the hour. So let's proceed immediately. It's a warm welcome once again. From an Aurik point of view, we are an organization operating across the orange circular areas, Sub-Saharan Africa, Europe, the UK, and North America, moving into Canada, with expertise in specifically mid-tier company growth and valuation. Andersen's, which will be represented by Derek Kaufman as a co-regional managing director for Africa and head of M&A in South Africa, have expertise obviously in tax and M&A. And representing both parties will be Derek Kaufman himself. Derek, wave your hand. As I call out your name, please wave your hand so everyone can put a name to a face. You will not be judged by the way you look. If I can make it on a screen, anyone can make it on a screen. So we don't have to worry about our presence and how we look. Ernest Marais, Director, Tax and Corporate Commercial Law in Africa. Jackie Pert, Director, Tax and M&A, Cross-Border Transactions in Africa. Kevin Hindley, who is a partner of Andersen's UK and heads up Corporation and Real Estate Tax. And myself, Pavlo Fatidis, as a co-founder and the current CEO of Aurik. We got together because our growth is centered entirely around your growth. And what we have realized is that mid-tier business owners are stretching beyond boundaries and borders everywhere. Specifically from a South African point of view, The competitive environment and low growth economy over here has seen businesses optimize increasingly with the view to now leverage currency differences between rand dollar, rand euro, rand pound as they enter into new markets across Europe, across the UK, across the USA, with not only products and services built to an international spec, but with significant price advantages. That process itself has seen a number of our clients require capital raises, and in order to do so, from an Aurik point of view, we recognized that because our growth depends on our clients' growth, we needed to find an aligned partner that was able to support the tax complexity that comes with growth, the processes around mergers and acquisitions as our clients sell into foreign entities or acquire foreign entities as part of their growth, and to do so in a manner with an organization that had representation across the markets that we play in, but equally had a similar culture. And that is an entrepreneurial view on how we provide our services to our clients. That is the reason why we got together. Derek, perhaps you can speak from Andersen's point of view around why you thought Aurik was a good partner within the greater ambit of Andersen's ambitions.
Thanks, Pav. Thanks so much for that. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the guests. So, Andersen is, I'm pleased to say, the fastest growing professional services firm in the world. We're a collection of independent law firms and tax firms spanning across 160 countries as of today. We're in 48 countries in Africa today. Spare a thought for PwC, they're only in 33. It makes us the single biggest professional services firm on the continent. And we've come with a mission. What is our mission? Our mission really is to make sure that the underserviced sector, which is the mid-tier sector, gets access to sophisticated tax and M&A and corporate advice. So the reason why Aurik was a logical choice for us was not only because of the charismatic leadership that they have and the great business vision which they have, but we also play in the same spaces, in that we both want to be speaking to mid-tier firms, mid-tier companies. The reason for that is because we know that the entrepreneur forms the backbone of economic growth in South Africa. We think it's a hopelessly underserviced sector insofar as it relates to sophisticated tax and M&A services and general corporate services. And as Pablo had already mentioned, when our clients grow, so do our businesses, unashamedly so. So our intention is to help our clients digest and manage risk, to grow and to compete in the ever-expanding global marketplace. So Aurik was a natural choice for us.
Fantastic. Thank you, Derek. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Yvonne, do you know what this beast is? It is the most formidable animal in Africa. More formidable than a lion, more formidable than an elephant. And this buffalo has always represented, certainly, the clients we work with. Formidable individuals building formidable businesses that have withstood challenges beyond what is reasonably acceptable. And sitting on the nose of this buffalo is a bird called the oxpecker. They have a symbiotic relationship, you see. What the buffalo needs in order to maintain its capability, its health, its adeptness, its formidability, is this small, simple little bird which serves two functions. The first is it removes parasites off the buffalo. It takes away the ticks, it takes away the spiders, it takes away the insects that can create disease within the herd itself. At the same time, it's a bird that notices threats to the buffalo herd. And because its well-being relies on the well-being of the herd, it notifies the buffalo around approaching prides of lions who look to hunt on the weaker of the buffalo. It is a symbiotic relationship. And unashamedly, in all my discussions over the last couple of years with Andersens, in all my discussions and the views I'd like to share with you today, and in all the discussions you might well have with your clients and customers. Our growth as Aurik comes from the growth of our clients, for the simple fact that we rely on 70% of our fees to be paid by the growth outcome of a client. In instances where we see opportunities to constantly improve and bolster client growth, we do so not only in our own self-interest, given that we rely on that growth, but with the view to grow our own businesses through the client growth itself. It is an oxpecker-buffalo relationship, much in the same way that Andersen thrives in your growth, we thrive in your growth, and together, with our focus on client growth, we believe we make a formidable team to support your future ambitions. So why do you do what you do? If building a business is similar to sailing a ship, which it is in many ways, think about it. You have a ship, it leaves a port, it sets a destination. To the extent that the destination is clearly set, you can navigate effectively. To the extent that you're navigating effectively, you can understand the resources you need in order to take your business from where it is to that final point in time. You know how to organize your systems, you know how to organize your crew, you know how to find the most efficient path and route from taking your business from one location to the next location, the final destination. And for a ship, like a business, there are only two destinations. The one destination is to arrive safely at a port with the view to offload your cargo for value. The other destination is where you find yourself out at sea, having exhausted your resources with no more gas in the tank to get to a final port. With a business, it's no different. Despite how much you believe in your business, how much you love your business, despite what your business does for you and how it feeds you, there are only two destinations globally for every business in the world. It either is a successful sale and exit or closure. Across the United States, which arguably has one of the most vibrant economies globally, 94.6% of companies started fail to sell, they close. I'm not talking about the first 5-10 years. I'm talking about businesses that are well established, done well by their founders, generated income, but have not succeeded in an exit. In Australia, another market that has really good measures in place, 97.2%. I suspect the numbers are similar in the UK and Europe as they are in sub-Saharan Africa. Why do you do what you do? Besides all the other gains and benefits we get from finding value in what we do, meaning creating opportunity, making some money along the way, the end game has to be clearly defined as a final exit, for it is only in that moment that you can monetize the 10, 20, 30, 40 years in some cases of risk and investment that it's taken to build your business to where it is today. I want to share a story with you very briefly. I call it failure and success because it's just not logical. This particular business, which I met about 16 years ago, it was a business that was started by an individual in his late 20s. He was involved in technology, networking, and communications. You know, the people who find the ghost in the machines, who connect printers and routers to servers and make sure that the mechanics, the communication, the flow, the Wi-Fi, the hardwire and softwire communication protocols between software and hardware and various workstations all function and work together. He built the business very successfully, steadily to 128 employees, and he did well. He now owns the building that he operates out of. He fully owns his house with no bond. He owns a holiday home with no bond. He put his kids, 3 of them, through private education. Every year, the family would travel internationally. We know the cost of that. On the face of it, an extremely successful individual. He then had an opportunity, almost 32 years in, and the opportunity came by way of someone knocking on the door and making an offer to acquire the business. It was a listed entity on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange in this instance. Immediately, this business, in acquiring the company, agreed the valuation of $5 million. $5 million makes for a satisfactory exit after a 35-year career and having built a business literally from the garage in a home. The deal was agreed at 5 million rand. In order to implement the deal, they went through a process of due diligence, where the buyer seeks to understand where the risks in the business lie, where the opportunities in the business lie, and to corroborate the value of the company itself. The 6-week due diligence moved to 8 weeks. In the 10th week, Clive, the business owner, said to me, something's not right here. They're taking far longer than what was anticipated. In the 12th week, the deal was finally concluded. The CEO of the listed entity knocked on the door, and the first thing, upon finalizing the deal, that Clive looked for was confirmation of the valuation at $5 million. However, the terms of the agreement saw the relationship stretch way beyond the anticipated 6 months of handover to a 3-year handover, with all sorts of warranties and conditions that made the deal simply untenable. It was cancelled, and today, Clive, who's approaching his mid-70s, has 11 staff from the 128, but he still owns the building, he still owns the houses. He no longer travels. And the big question, of course, is when looking in the rearview mirror, what went wrong? An individual with great expertise in building a business that generates income, good income, solid income, but failed to secure that exit in a manner that made it tenable and in a manner that allowed him to monetize the 30 years of early investment. From an Aurik perspective, what we noticed was the following. The business centered on Clive. Without him, the supply chain fell apart. Without him, his team was unable to lead independently. And without him, many of the first customers, which remained customers during the entire tenure of his business, were likely to remain. I'd like to open up the floor to yourselves, my colleagues at Andersen's. What could have been done differently? What are the 3 things that could have been done differently in order to bring this opportunity to life? Bernie, perhaps you could start. What would you have looked at differently on this business?
Thank you, Pablo. I'm sorry, guys, I've had some technical issues. It obviously didn't make use of a good tech file.
No, we can hear you perfectly. We can hear you perfectly.
Thanks. I think, Pablo, we've obviously, and I think my colleague Jackie will speak to supply agreements and the due diligence going wrong. I think once you've missed that ship, I think, the opportunity is very often what we look at, what is the next potential way of your second option to exit? And it's always from a succession planning point of view, we always look at, what have you done? What could you have done to create succession planning in terms of your services, in terms of transferring your clients and making sure that your employees can take over the ship from you as you run out of energy. And one of the key things that we very often advise clients is, listen, guys, set KPIs for your employees, create employee share schemes to get them to build the business with you and buy the business with you. The very question that very often pops up is, I don't want to give an employee shares if he's going to leave 3, 4, 5 years from now. And our solution as well, that's a very simple solution for us. You can always find a way how to structure that share entitlement of your employee. If he leaves within 5 years, he gets penalized. All the shares doesn't vest until 5 years. You keep the dangling carrot there until such time that you're in a position where he can really take over and run the business for you. It also allows you to, then, if you need to exit at the age of 60, 70, that you've got people that you can exit for. A management buyout is one of the easiest ways to exit and hand over the reins. You can go and you can sit and you can go and retire. You can go back traveling. You can do what you need to do, and your employees can actually buy the company from you, and they can take the business on and carry on seamlessly as if there was no change in ownership being transferred.
Fantastic. And that's especially true, especially in very people-centric, technology-driven businesses. Jackie, one of the big challenges over here is that he had principals across Europe and across the Far East, where he had exclusive lines of supply to various routers and printers and devices that were fundamental to the delivery of his service. What could he have done differently in order to secure that supply chain? Because it was one of the big issues that came up in the due diligence.
Well, I think what is important is, firstly, they need to be tax efficient, and anything you do around the supply chain, and it's not only, it's customers and suppliers that we're talking about. What is important is that you're able to transfer those contracts on conclusion of a successful disposal. If your suppliers and contracts are going to use that as the out when the business is transferred to say, we don't want to do business with you anymore, it becomes tricky and it weakens your negotiating power.
Yeah,
so
very definitely. And I think especially in a founder-led business, because those early relationships to secure those agreements were done on relationship.
Well, they were sometimes, you know, and we see this in remarkably large businesses. They were done originally where you've got a very strong personality in the founder of the business, the patriarch of the business. Sometimes they were done on a handshake, and those handshakes continued. And it's not an ideal position to be in the sort of larger world, you know.
Kevin, how do you, or do you stumble into due diligence? How long does it take to prepare for a due diligence if you're seeking to exit? What sort of timeline should you allow for yourself?
Hi, everyone. In my opinion, you should allow at least 24 months. So one of the first things that we will do when we're working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses is say, right, you don't want this story to unfold in the manner in which it has happened to you. How do you guard against that? You perform a health check up front. Because if these issues are out on diligence, you're too late to fix it. And the issue is going to go directly to price. So how do you optimize your exit? Well, what you need to do is you need to start with the end in mind. You need to look backwards. So right at the beginning of a relationship, health check across the business. And we look at this from a tax perspective in the UK for our small and medium-sized clients all the time. That then gives you a 2-year window where those issues can be remediated, they can be fixed, and then you can approach the point of sale, be that a traditional DD process or indeed a vendor DD process. Yep. You can approach that sale with the assurance that the skeletons in the cupboard have been well and truly buried.
Folks, the message is very simple. A business needs to be built to be sold. It's not simply bought. In the same way that a business needs to be built to be grown, it doesn't simply grow. Growth and exit remain a challenge globally. A survey was done of 10,000 mid-tier businesses across South Africa, Europe, the UK, and the US. And what we discovered was the following. Many relied on hope. They had no growth strategy other than let's double up revenues or let's improve profitability. Beyond the metrics, what was the strategy? 85% who intended to grow had no strategy that was written down, that was articulated, and that was measured, most importantly. Within those businesses, 95% of them, of the 10,000 businesses, had employees who were unaware of what the growth strategy was. And on a deeper dive, 68% had misaligned functions, the functions of marketing, of sales, of operations, of administration, of finance, of human capital, of procurement. They are the gears of a business that drive growth. They're the gears of the business that lock in the capital value for an exit. 68% had misaligned functions in relation to their growth ambitions. They sought help but didn't get it. Many of them went out. They spoke to their accountants, of course, and they spoke to advisors, and they spoke to consultants. And of those that engaged professional institutions, 88% complained about the fact that they wanted growth as an outcome, not advice. Of those that got advice, 4.9% were able to implement it. How does it impact you as a business owner? Well, globally, around 83% of businesses that list for sale fail to sell. Of those that do, around 67% of them make significant concessions not only in terms of the capital price or value, but the exit requirements and terms. It means, of course, that the stats do start to make sense. 94.6% of businesses started failed to sell. In family businesses and professional services, 74.3% globally succeed in transferring from one tier of leadership to the next future tier of leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, this is in the hands of business owners, no different to any of us. And the reason that we should be concerned is because right now we're entering into the remaining 8 years of what has been arguably one of the toughest decades we've all faced with COVID. 2020 to 2030, across the EU, 1.5 million businesses in the mid-tier space, 1.4 million in the US, 103,000 in the UK, and 42,000 in South Africa. Companies with annual revenues between 5 and 75 million a year, more than 50% of them are in the hands of baby boomers whose average age is 64. What this means is the following. In the next 8 years, we will see more company disposals and acquisitions than we have seen possibly in any of the decades before during our current existence as members on screen. It is competitive out there, it's noisy out there. And this means that going forward, there are only 2 simple strategic imperatives that all of us need to make as a commitment today with the view to start 2022. Either it is about scaling, growing, and dominating a segment, because within that environment, you will be able to reach heights unfamiliar before of the many, many businesses exiting. Within those businesses lie future acquisitions for you. Alternatively, you might be looking to grow, deepen your profit with the view to monetize and exit successfully. And in that process of exiting, it's going to be a buyer's market given the voracity and volume of M&A activity we expect in the next 8 years. Distinguishing yourself and setting yourself apart by building the business to not only be saleable, but building it to grow and grow beyond the exit is going to be imperative should you want to position for a premium exit. Let's look at both, a story on each. Currently, we're working with a really interesting client in the plumbing wholesale space, plumbing and renewable energies. It's been going for 16 years. It's a 48-year-old business. It's now in its new leadership tier. They operate 9 physical locations around sub-Saharan Africa. Plumbing, heating, renewable energy. Currently doing revenues of around $14 million a year with an EBITDA at 15%, enjoying a valuation of around $6.8 million. The work at play and the job being done is centered around the following. In the first instance, in order to build the business to be saleable, with the view to build the business for growth, we're aligning and unifying right across the board each location. It's fascinating in multi-location businesses. The reporting structures, the performance structures, the governance structures, the client and customer experience that occurs at one location very often differs from location to location. Unifying that client experience is what tightens the brand and allows that particular brand to then start dominating growth within a particular segment. At the same time, this business is creating a digital front end that will see it stretch right across Africa through Alibaba and many other channels, not yet before opened. The second act is to acquire and then dominate 2 providers within South Africa, and thereafter, in relocating the business into the UK, an acquisition has been identified that has attached to it 34 locations. The systems, the strategies, the optimized platforms around the local locations will see all those commercial systems placed into that UK acquired business. And through that process, what we're expecting to achieve by the end of 2023 are 45 optimized locations, a far more vibrant supply chain, more efficiency within each of the locations that reflect each other on a mirror-for-mirror basis, driving up EBITDAs by at least another 3-4%, with obviously the attendant growth in revenues and a market access capitalization of around $125 million. South African business capitalizing on the fact that it's able to, in a low growth economy, attain super efficiencies that it can take into, yes, a competitive economy, but one that is far more vibrant in order to lift the profitability and therefore its valuation. Let's talk about what's needed to package this business right. So Kevin, I'm going to acquire, on behalf of a client, a very well-established third-generation family business in the United Kingdom. What do I need to be concerned about?
Well, I think the first thing is let's have a look at the numbers here. Not everyone can afford to cut a check in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And what that means is that a sale at that quantum, at that value, is going to determine to a very large extent who your buyer is. And there are really two different types of buyer that you can have who can afford to write a check at that level, who can afford to play in this profile of game. And that is either a multinational corporate, which will be a trade sale, or it will be a sophisticated private equity house. Each of these buyers have access to highly sophisticated professionals in both the M&A and the transactional tax space. You are looking at a due diligence process, if you are the vendor, where you will be faced with an A team out of one of the big four consulting firms, and you will be faced with an A team on the negotiation of the SPA out of a Magic Circle or Silver Circle law firm. And that is what you need to prepare for. Now, these processes can, in certain instances, be brutal. And you will, at the stage where you are looking at this form of exit, have outgrown the local advisor, have outgrown the mom and pop shop, that you started with, who looked after your business when it was domestically focused. And you will need someone who has the expertise, the experience, the international presence, and, frankly, the level of client care within its own entrepreneurial culture to be able to carry this process through to a success.
I cannot emphasize that enough, because when transactions of this size and significance take place at the level you've just described, the process of negotiation is always centered on shaving off the percentage of value through the due diligence process, through tax evaluation and risk processes and the like, getting the purchase price down from $125 million expected dollars to $115 million pays enormous dividends for competing firms. And it really is important to understand that this goes way beyond value. It goes deeply into structuring. With that said, Ernie, is there a way to organize the intellectual property of this particular business to secure the following? Number one, it needs to raise funding to make the acquisition. The funding source already has been identified coming out of Hong Kong. At the same time, it needs to be organized in such a way so that the risks associated with the operational aspects of the business and the intellectual property that will be built into the systems that support the performance of locations can be separated out, because each attracts a different multiple of valuation. How would you approach the packaging of a business in that instance?
Thank you, Pablo. Yeah, I think my approach will be, I think the starting point will be do it rather sooner than later. The intellectual property you very often find where your client base and your revenues are coming in from various sources from numerous sources of countries, various countries. However, your moneymaker is sitting in one country. And we found over the last couple of years that, big investors, private equity houses, that's been referred to by Kevin, they do not want to necessarily buy a South African-based asset. If this company is serving 45 countries over the world, they want the key asset to sit in a more, what they refer to as a more sophisticated jurisdiction, although I disagree with the level of sophistication. And I've got a short story on that. We've had a family-based business, very valuable, couple of years ago, where there was a potential acquirer, and they wanted to buy their asset, but the IP was sitting in South Africa. They wanted to move the IP and acquire the IP offshore. In order to move the IP at that point in time, there was a lot of exchange control restrictions. It was a massive tax event, and the potential acquirer said, "Listen, can't you do this on a tax-free basis? Can't you do this?" And we said, "No, you can't." And the American, being as smart as he is, told us that is a very stupid set of rules. And I said, yes, I agree, but that's unfortunately part and parcel of it. And I wish I could go back. That's the type of time that you would love to have go back 10 years earlier and say, listen, let's start planning from day one in order to exit on day 10,000.
Look, I can concur with that. We've seen many instances where, with certain South African clients looking to acquire assets and businesses and operating entities in order to broaden their distribution across the UK and the US. In each instance that we've sought a capital raise, the big question mark is, where does the IP sit? And does it sit in a jurisdiction where the intellectual property is safe, can be well guarded, well maintained, with precedents demonstrating that? So the organization of a business in terms of its packaging pre-raising this funding is going to be essential. At the same time, Derek, I wonder if you could just comment quickly on how the valuation structures could work, because valuation for an operating entity, valuation for an intellectual property entity, the two of them carry very different potential, don't they?
Apologies about that. I was just unmuting myself. Yes, they do, absolutely. And so, when you look at intellectual property valuations, that's usually on a discounted cash flow basis. You would look forward and say, this is the kind of royalties that you'll be receiving. And so it's a fairly straightforward valuation methodology. Whereas, in operations where you're asset intensive, many of the valuation methodologies talk rather to a net asset value and EBITDA and multiples of EBITDA, specifically supported by the asset valuation. So it does make sense in many cases to package your assets in a way that allows you to value them differently, so that you don't find contamination between the valuations. You want to maximize the valuations that you're getting across the various asset classes that you're holding.
But you know what? It's the message is so clear to me, and we see this consistently, having worked with over 3,000 mid-tier companies over the last 15 years. You don't just decide on a strategy as the strategy presents itself through an opportunity. At some point in time, it really becomes vital, especially in the mid-tier space, to set a very clearly defined strategy. If it is going to be scale, grow, dominate within a segment, packaging a business in order to make the path to that final destination as efficient from a tax point of view and as effective from a collaboration partnering point of view is vital. It's impossible to grow at a significant level without raising capital. And if that capital is to be raised in order to allow entry into a different market, then you need to play and design the business differently for the funders and their requirements within that market. Grow and exit, a great story. A baker, 55 years old, 11 years ago, had started the business at 29 years of age, was fourth generation, and it was diversified across the sector. It was involved in supplying ovens, fresh baked goods, flour. It ran coffee bakery shops. And proudly, the business owner said to us, I've diversified my risk. I have revenues coming in from all aspects of the baking sector. And yet, he was exhausted beyond measure, sick to death with it, having lost his passion and love. He attempted to sell the business in the market and was attracting around a $2 million valuation on a $5 million revenue. His EBITDA numbers were low. I said, why did you not exit? And he said, because the business is worth far more than that. I said, how so? And he argued about the potential and the future potential that lay locked and hidden within the business itself. Very quickly, once he understood that valuation was driven more by math than potential, he undertook a different process of building out the business. Over 11 years, the business was dramatically simplified. It shed a lot of its diversified revenue streams and decided to grow and dominate within the hotel hospitality segment, onboarding fresh baked goods every morning for continental breakfasts. He moved effectively into the space, marketed very, very definitively, and captured by far most of the multinationals that operate across the territory. He then sought to diversify revenues, and in doing so, identified a growth strategy that would keep the business position focused as a 365 fresh-baked onboarding business that would maintain all the systems and mechanics, the gears that make the business work, and would keep his team super focused. He found it within the supermarket sector. And thereafter, once he had started to penetrate the supermarket sector, providing fresh-baked goods every morning for morning trade, similar to the hotels, he locked in the value through some very, very smart innovation. It got to a point where the business was well ensconced within two verticals as the dominant provider of fresh baked goods on a 365 basis. There's a third under development in the franchising sector, and an approach was made by the Buffer Consortium to acquire the business. 11 years on, instead, the founder, who 11 years previous was ready to get out, decided to succeed the business through family to the next generation. At that point in time, he was sitting with an $85 million revenue. EBITDAs had risen. The valuation put on the table was $115 million, but he opted, along with the family, to get the business built to its further next level. In this instance, what was absolutely vital from an Aurik point of view is that should you choose to improve valuations, there are 5 levers that come into play, which I will share with you in the slide that follows this. It was vital to get those 5 levers into position. Much like you build a ship to perform a particular function, if you know what the function of the ship is, you know what the destination of the ship is, you can build the hull appropriately, you can build the engine room appropriately, you can get the right crew to do the right thing on an appropriate basis in order to allow you, as the captain of the ship, to lead the direction to that destination from the bridge. From an Andersen tax consulting M&A perspective, Jackie, what's one of the most important things when you're looking to transfer responsibility from one generation to the next in a family business succession, especially tax implications in terms of how you hold the ownership of that business? Unmute. Almost there. Press your space bar. It'll unmute.
There we go. Sorry, guys.
There we go.
Okay, so in terms of wanting to on-sell this business, obviously as profitably as possible and as optimally as possible, and following on from the previous example, where during the scale, grow, and dominate stage, one's obviously trying to optimize tax opportunities and also manage the tax risks, so that when one reaches the exit stage, one's able to withstand the rigors of a DD. Because any tax risks picked up in the DD, that affects A, the negotiation, and B, the ultimate purchase price. The other thing that I think sellers of businesses sometimes don't, they don't think about is often it's more tax efficient for a seller to sell the shares in its business as opposed to the assets. Very often the buyer of that business would prefer to acquire the assets because it's cleaner. Obviously, if a buyer is acquiring shares, all the history in those shares goes with it, including the tax risks. So it's incredibly important during the scale up, grow, and phase to be just making sure that everything is tax efficient and that you can withstand the rigors of a DD, because this will affect the ultimate valuation and the ultimate purchase price acquired. And as sellers, you may want a share sale, which is not going to be possible if their exposure is dotted all over the DD.
Derek, from a valuation point of view, what are the insights and the lessons that you could share around how this business was built and packaged in order to secure a confirmed acquisition offer being made by the Buffett Consortium? What typically would an investor like that look for to be confident enough beyond the sustainability of the business going forward that it was an asset that was transferable, safe, and sustainable?
You know, above, there's really two very important gears or levers here that determine that valuation. Obviously, there's some assets there, and those assets need to sweat, and they do what they need to do. But your customer contracts, the agreements that you have with your customers, they need to be long-term. They need to be embedded. So when you sell it, the purchaser who buys it know that they're getting an embedded value. And so if you're selling on a COD basis to clients, then you're only as good as your last order. When you have a long stretch and people have signed you up for an extended period, you now have value to sell. You've got that depth in the value. Similarly, on the supply side, when you've got your input costs, you may have negotiated costs around input products like wheat and flour and whatever you need. Those costs that come in, you also need to be able to manage those long term, because what you can't have is a critical supplier stopping to serve you, stopping to supply you at a critical time. That's a high risk issue. And so what you really want to do is you want to make sure that your supply chain is well set and sustainable, that your customer contracts are well set and sustainable. That will give you depth of valuation in terms of forward-looking sustainability of the business.
In short, anything that's a relationship needs to be contracted. I want to talk very quickly about the future in terms of today. There are 5 levers that drive valuation. So in the first instance, just globally, more or less, and I know that everyone will have a grumble about this, but more or less, a business's valuation begins on a 2 multiple of EBITDA. More or less. It varies in certain sectors, it varies in certain industries, it varies depending on certain elements around country risk, it varies on the socio-economic or the political mood of an environment ever so slightly. But effectively, most valuations start at a 2 times multiple of profit. So if you're doing an EBITDA of $3 million, your starting valuation is a 6 million valuation. And this is going to go to the point that Kevin made earlier around the process of negotiation. Firstly, from a business build, buyers negotiate the value of a company and sellers negotiate the value of a company by evaluating 5 levers. The first lever is centered around what makes your business different, what makes you special, bearing in mind that we are moving into the majority of mid-tier companies globally being in the hands of baby boomers. This is a scenario that any one of us could face in the next 8 years. You are one of 1 million businesses just like you. Despite the fact that you think you have a great product, despite the fact that you think you have a price advantage, what makes you special? And that question needs to be answered definitively around the source of your revenue, and that is, who do you serve and what experience do you provide for them that makes them stick with you, to Derek's earlier point. The next thing is, well, then how does the business work? If I believe that you have a point of distinction, and that point of distinction is experienced by your customers rather than your own impressions of your business, how does the business work? And that then looks to the gears that drive the business. What are the gears that bring new clients on board, that convert clients into customers, that fulfill your promises to clients? Are those systems organized? Are they integrated? Are they coordinated? Are they measurable? In other words, without you there, will that engine that drives the propeller of your ship continue to turn? The next area centers on team. Going to Ernie's earlier point, locking in a team of purposeful leaders that look beyond the relationship with you and find value and meaning not only in the work they do, but the future of the company itself. Meaning that after you have migrated on, they would remain with the view to continue the growth of the business as it has been reflected in the years previous. Growth, selling a business without first growing it and lifting the growth rates in the 2-3 year period before exit, nullifies any argument that the growth in the future will be further and faster than the growth in the most recent past. And then finally, tradability. How do you package a business, including yourself, to see the business not as a job, but as an asset? An asset has 3 criteria to it. The first is it demonstrates income growth that occurs without you. The second is it locks in, to Derek's earlier point, the capital value of the business. And the third is it is packaged to be effectively sold and transferred, either to funders who you would seek to raise growth capital from, or to a potential acquirer that you would seek to find your exit from. Getting those 3 levers right for the very same said business today that would be valued at $6 million is the difference between a $6 million exit and a $21 million exit. In instances where you cannot defend these levers, it's the difference between a business that would have been valued at $6 million today to a business that effectively would be sold for $1 simply for you to get rid of the headache. The story of Clive refers. Businesses are not bought. They need to be built to be sold. Businesses don't just grow. They need to be built to be sold. And the packaging needs to go beyond the operational activities that most of us as mid-tier businesses focus on. It needs to consider the tax impact. It needs to consider the 5 levers of valuation, and it needs to consider liability from the perspective of an acquirer, your new customer, as you approach the end of your tenure. Why Andersen Aurik? We believe that our strategic alliance is your strategic advantage for 3 main reasons. We are aligned on growth and outcome. We are not a bill you and leave you service. We are entrepreneurial. We attach ourselves to the outcome of growth and seek to be rewarded on that growth outcome. Not the promise of growth, but the measured outcome of growth. We are growth geared. In many ways, if you consider what our alliance offers you as a business, through Aurik, we seek to maximize the upside. Through Andersen's, we seek to guard the downside. And through that, we deliver an asset packaged business. It's built and packaged for a transaction, either to raise capital to support next level growth, or to be able to monetize and exit through a successful sale. And with that, I've reached the end of my time, 2 minutes over. I do apologize. This image speaks 1,000 words. The next steps are this. Let's meet eye to eye. And let's see if we can impact your business. Let's see if we understand where you seek to go in the next 8 years, with the view to see what we can bring in order to help you get there faster, more effectively, more efficiently, with more certainty. And let's structure a deal around that as growth partners, not as service providers. If we're unable to impact you and the future of your business, let's establish a relationship. We constantly both have clients looking to acquire companies. We have clients looking to invest in companies. And through our relationship, we will find opportunities for each other. With that, please expect an email to come through on the back of this. We will put a recording of this presentation and the event itself for your own consumption and use. And I'll be putting down the contact details of my colleagues at Andersen and my colleagues at Aurik. I wish you all the best over the December period, but please, even though I don't know you, can you make me a personal promise? 2022 needs to start with a very clear concise, simple, deliberate strategy. We've lost 2 years of ambivalence and uncertainty in COVID. We've got time that we need to make up. Let's make it count, because the one thing you can never get back in life is time. Thank you very much for joining us, folks, and we look forward to seeing you on the other side of this.
Thanks, Pablo. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.